Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all our viewers on this second edition of the Live Talk series, Let's Share. These are personal stories of hope, courage, and positivity. Each talk features cancer survivors, or as Vijay Bhatt, one of our speakers, had said, cancer thrivers, and or caregivers. They share with us the strength and courage it takes to walk this journey of recovery and care. We have just concluded the first edition of the Live Talk series where we discussed complementary and alternative medicine, CAM. And during those talks, we were told that while medicine heals the disease, there are many other interventions that heal the person. These interventions address emotional, physical, and spiritual areas, among others. These interviews are available on our YouTube channel, Caped India. You can go and watch them now if you've missed the first series. This second series shares real-life experiences of this journey. Today, we are in conversation with Alok Goyal. Welcome to the show, Alok. We are so happy to have you here and for the chance to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Madhu. Really appreciate.
About Caped a little bit. If you have been following us on social media or you've heard about us, you will know we work in the area of cervical cancer. We are a grassroots NGO and have been in the field for a little over 6 years now. So far, we have stayed with mainstream information and awareness on cancer prevention and care. We follow the WHO standards of awareness. We have reached out to over 19 million so far. And we realize our responsibility in bringing to our followers and viewers a more inclusive and a larger world view on tried and tested interventions and learnings in the area of cancer. Our third guest in the second series is Alok Goyal. It is doubly inspiring to have Alok with us today as he is a founding trustee of Caped as well. And he has guided and navigated our journey beautifully over the last 6 years. I'm personally very thankful to him for being with us on this journey. Alok Goyal, in his day job, if we can call it that, is a partner at Stellaris Venture Partners, an early stage technology focused venture capital firm based out of Bangalore. Prior to Stellaris, Alok was a partner at Helion Ventures, Chief Operating Officer of SAP India, and held various leadership roles in the US and India with SAP. Alok has an undergrad degree from IIT Delhi, a master's in computer science from the University of Texas at Austin, and an MBA from INSEAD in France. Alok is one of the founding trustees of Caped. Alok's association with cancer started with his mother being diagnosed with cancer in early 2007. She was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. Alok and his wife Pooja were the primary caregivers for a cancer that lasted 4.5 years. He is here in the capacity of a caregiver to share with us his very personal journey. Thank you so much, Alok, for being willing to share this with us. So can we kind of know a little bit more about what happened? How did you go through with it?
Sure, Madhu. And first of all, I mean, while you have given a thanks to me, I guess similar amount of thanks to you. It's been really, what should I say, fulfilling to walk the last 6 years of Caped with you. Maybe a couple of qualifiers before I answer your question, Madhu, directly. Number one is that even though it's been a while since my mother passed away, and I'll talk about that in my context, the whole period and the topic still remains quite emotional to me. So if you see any bouts of emotion during this period, just understand that.
We are with you, Alok.
So
I can imagine.
So just to set the context, my mother, or my parents rather, had 2 children. I'm one of them. I have an elder brother who used to live in New York. I used to be based in the Bay Area. And this is, I'm talking in the early 2000s. So the context is that my father passed away in Germany in some, I would say, bizarre circumstances in 2006. And that was in August. And my mother and my father used to live in India, of course. And after that happened, my mother was actually insistent that she will remain in India. My brother and I were just not okay with that concept. And you can say that we forced her to move with me to California.
Oh.
And literally in a few months, so August is when my father passed away. September, she moved with me to California. Sometime in early January of 2007, she began to And we had a newborn at the end of December. And she used to be up at night taking care of her too. And she began to complain of some nausea, some abdominal ache. And we didn't, I mean, she didn't care much about it. And we were anyway scheduled to make a trip to India in that February for a week. It was more a quick trip and go back. And while she was in India, she thought she should just meet her gynae. So she met, and her gynae said that, look, ma'am, your symptoms suggest that you should get an MRI done. And we went to Saket Max Hospital in Delhi. And that day was, I think, 17th of February back in 2007. And my daughter is laughing at me because I tend to remember all dates.
That's good. Normally women complain that men don't remember dates. That's
it's the other way around at our home. So that's when she got diagnosed on that day in the MRI.
So the MRI itself told you it was a cancer, is it?
Yes.
There was no biopsy or anything required?
We went through all that too, but literally the technician who did the MRI told me on the side, ki, sir, it's very clear that it's a cancer.
Oh.
It's a late stage cancer. But so the context is that was February 2007. My mother then eventually passed away at the end of May in 2011. So I think at an overarching level, number one is that while we'll talk about many different things today,
right,
I do think that, as I look back in hindsight, I think it was not that bad a situation now in hindsight. My mother lived a lot longer than I think the time she was quote unquote allotted. She died when she was 65. She had a pretty reasonable life during that period. I think in many ways we were lucky that my father was not around during that period. I think sometimes it can be very hard for a spouse to see that period. So all in all, I think it was actually not, I just want to give that context so that it is not sounding like some horror story that I was watching on the sidelines. I think that in the end, it's actually much better than what it could have been. So some more specific, she was diagnosed with a stage 3C ovarian cancer. It had already spread to her lymph nodes. At the time she got diagnosed, the doctor said that she has at best 2 years. Yeah, but she survived 4.5 years. So that's sort of the context back in 2007.
That's right. So you said you're giving us context so that we don't think that it was like a horror story. But did it feel like that? I mean, are you saying that because while you were going through it, it really felt like a terrible time?
So Bridu, this is interesting because at least I feel that maybe it's because of association to cancer. I feel like almost everybody I know seems to have some cancer association somewhere in the family.
True.
At the time my mother got diagnosed, I used to believe that, there are probably some people where it happens, but it was just sort of in stories that you used to hear.
Yes.
And when I remember that the day she got diagnosed, and maybe I'll be a bit graphic here, that she got taken through the MRI. The curious me went into the technician room because I didn't want to wait to meet even the doctor. And he said ki, and I'm going to say this in Hindi, he said ki, sir, aapko doctor se to milna padega abhi, lekin main aapko bata raha hu ki cancer to hai sir. And
can I just ask, did she go in on a suspicion of cancer? Was that what the doctor was suspecting?
Her gynae in India, who she visited just a few days back, did tell her that, look, it could be.
It could be, okay.
And therefore, he suggested that, look, you should get an MRI done.
Okay.
And we visited a family friend in the hour or two we had in between before we could meet the doctor, right next to Max Hospital. And I remember that I completely broke down. And maybe it was just my mother's cancer and what the images I think that word creates in the mind. I think for me, it was also because I was not prepared for my father's death at all.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that it was because of hospital's mistake. We were fighting a lawsuit with a hospital in Germany at that point in time. The wounds were fresh. And to see this happen back to back, I think is what at least made that very hard at that point. So yes, at that time, it seemed like a horror show going on. You begin to ask questions like, why me?
Why me?
Or why her?
Yeah.
Also, I think stage 3C, I didn't even know the names of the stages. But during that hour or two, we figured out that there are 4 stages and you're pretty much in stage 4. So it's sort of also the feeling of helplessness that suddenly dawned upon me at that point in time. But what made it probably one notch worse was that, ironically, the first time my mother had abdominal pains was the same day as my father died in Germany.
Oh my goodness.
So my father was hospitalized. He had angina pains. I was reaching that night in Germany. And when I reached, my mom told me that she had lots of pains that day. She went to the doctor and she was very dismissive about her pains. So she told me in Hindi that, you know, in German doctor कुछ नहीं आता है, इनके पास सब कुछ नहीं है, उन्होंने मुझे कहा अल्ट्रासाउंड करवा लो, मैं क्यों करवाऊं अल्ट्रासाउंड? That was her response to the entire problem. Also because the thought process was being governed by my dad's illness at that point in time. And that night my father passed away.
Oh.
And then, I mean, in a couple of days, we actually went for an ultrasound because of maybe language issues, whatever it was. And because we just didn't know how to deal with my dad's death. I think in some ways, this entire thing got forgotten.
Oh my goodness.
And we woke up 6 months later. But sometimes I do think, as I look back, that in many ways, both of them died on the same day, in some sense. Because had we been able to diagnose it 6 months earlier, maybe the outcome could have been different for us.
That sounds like you're taking on too much burden at the moment that, you know, we could have done. That's what happens usually, you know, it's all on hindsight. We could have done that. We should have done that. And then we kind of blame ourselves. So how did you move from that space and decide to take on the responsibility of caring for her and going through all of that, if you were going through all of that turmoil on your own?
So I think sometimes the best decisions in life are not taken. They're taken for you. I think so. It was, I think, initial reaction, in addition to being shocked about my mother's illness, was one of being a little bit selfish, which is that I was pretty well settled in US with my family. I had 2 kids. One was 2 months old and the other was almost 3 years old. My wife was working in US as well. My brother and his wife are working in New York as well. And they had moved to New York actually relatively recently at that point in time. So we basically were trying to convince my mother that, look, she should just get her treatment done in US. And my bhabhi is a doctor.
Oh.
There's one more reason that we thought that, look, US is the best place.
Absolutely.
We will never get that kind of medical care elsewhere. And I can't deny that at the back of my mind, it was the option that entailed the least disruption to life. I continue in my job, my wife continues in my job, or whatever, right? It was very automatic. And I remember that we paraded my mom through, I mean, Sloan Memorial Kettering in New York University, and I mean, pretty much every doctor we could get our handle on in US. Everybody convinced us that, look, the right place to get surgery done is US. But I think here it'd be important for me to just give a glimpse of my mother. She listened to no one. She never listened to anyone, actually, for that matter.
Good for her.
She only did what she wanted, and she was very clear. She said, my treatment will be in India. You guys can decide what you guys want to do. I actually I don't want to pressurize you guys into anything, but I will be in India. Now, you know, and she met with this doctor, some of you might have known of her, Vijay Lakshmi Bhargav. She used to be the head of Department of Gynae in AIIMS. She met Dr. Bhargav at Sitaram Bhartiya in Delhi. And Dr. Bhargav was already pretty old at that time, but there was sort of a little bit of, what should I say, I'm struggling for the right word, but the comfort. I
There
think
must have been a rapport of some kind.
the rapport. And she said, look, my treatment will be India. That's very clear. So at that point, we came, I mean, we were shuttling New York, California, India, literally in every 2-3 day basis. I think we were just perennially on flights
My goodness.
with my mother. Once she took that call, now this was a moment of truth. And I think many decisions, as I said, get taken. And the one thing that I think there will be no actual real way for me to thank my wife Pooja, will be that clearly in my heart, I wanted to move back to India at that point in time, which meant that I need to make an ask. And before I could make an ask, she's the one who came to me and said that I think we should be just moving to India. This is not something to be thought about. Let's just move to India. And I tried to debate with her because I thought that, look, if we take this call, it will mean a massive disruption to our careers. You know, in a few years, she might be very upset that, you know, all these things we did were probably insane. I'm probably going to bear the brunt of those decisions in the end. So I tried to convince her as to why we should not do it. And she said that, look, this is not even something to be even thought about. We just pack our bags and we move. So I think in 2-3 days we made the call.
Wow.
And that's the time we had just bought a house because we had decided that we are in the US for good. We had applied for a citizenship.
My goodness.
I remember I went to my boss the next day and said that, look, I need to move back to India. And I think that's where that part is where you begin to find that as much toughness is there in the world, there's probably a lot more goodness in the world too. So my boss was a Moroccan guy, brilliant guy, pretty senior in the SAP ranks. And as luck would have it, the guy who headed US geography for my company suddenly got responsibility for Asia Pacific exactly a day before I went to them. His mother also turned out to have cancer.
My goodness, look at the play.
So I had a chat with my boss and the guy who headed US. His name is Bill McDermott. And Bill spoke to me and Bill said, Alok, don't even think about it, just move to India. This is not the time to think about what job will you have, what compensation you will have, etc., etc. He said, there are some situations in life where you do what you need to do. So just pack your bags, go to India, and we'll take care of you. And my wife went to her boss, and his name was Ricky. And Ricky said the same thing. He said, Pooja, just move to India, and we will take care of you. So I mean, literally in a week, we decided we'll move back to India. I started shuttling between India and US for a few weeks. My mother's surgery happened. She started chemotherapy. And in August, we moved lock, stock, and barrel while I was still mostly in India during that period as well. Sorry for the long story, but that's the context.
No, it's beautiful. It just talks about making all these huge decisions. One would say that they are hasty, but it seems like almost like the universe was all aligned for it. Everything kind of fell into place and you all could move. So you're saying that she was diagnosed somewhere in Feb and by August you had moved to India.
Yeah, by August I moved to India, but during that time, I spent bulk of my time in India still.
India itself. So in the time that you all were doing up and down or taking her through the various hospitals in New York, her treatment hadn't started. Because from what we know, it had started, right?
There was no time for delaying treatment.
Exactly.
She got surgery at the end of February itself.
Right.
And my brother and his wife actually took long breaks from work to be with her in Gurgaon. So we made sure that one of the four of us, which is my brother or his wife and one of us was with my mom all along during this first line of chemo also that happened during that period. But we formally moved back in terms of formal move back in August.
In August. And you decided to move back. So it was a decision the family made, or just that you and your wife made this decision and you
So
were
we made
back?
that decision because, to be honest, my brother didn't even have a choice at that point. He had just moved. As I said, his wife was a doctor, and US has these very weird rules for being a doctor. You basically have to repeat your education /
Correct.
all over again. So my bhabhi had given everything up to be in US with my brother, started from scratch all over again. And it was not possible to cut the cord at that point in time. I was at that stage where it was much easier for me to move to India than for him to. So if the question is really, did we discuss? No, none of that ever got discussed with anyone, even between us.
Okay.
It was just that it was very natural for what needed to be done, and that got done, basically.
Okay. Okay. So when you say that she went in for surgery and then her chemo started, who was guiding you? Was that Dr. Bhargav? How did you figure out what you wanted to do, what line of treatment you were going to use?
So I think this is the problem with people who are even slightly educated these days, that they believe that they can make all the right decisions. So my brother and I were absolute prototypes of that problem. We read, I think, an insane amount of stuff on the internet. I think I felt that I had become an oncologist myself. I could talk about lines of treatment by first line, second line treatment, and different options, surgery first, chemo later, or chemo first and surgery later.
God, there's so much information online.
And yeah, it's just, and of course, through first degree connections, second degree connections, third degree connections, we reached out to a number of doctors, which was also insane equally. But as I said, while we can keep thinking that we are making a decision, my mother made the decision who's the doctor who's going to do the surgery. Number two is that everybody said that the first line of treatment was very standard. So there was no debate. Maybe I'll answer a broader question, which is that if a cancer prolongs for a while, and for those of the listeners for whom this might be either their patients themselves or caregivers, where they are dealing with very early stages right now, usually first line treatments are very standard protocols. But as the cancer progresses, it's a second line, third line treatment that you have more choices. And what we did was, and I think we were very fortunate to be in that position, that we had a doctor in New York, a doctor in California, and a doctor in Cleveland. All three were friends who we kept updated throughout the treatment as long as my mother was alive. Whenever we had to take any decision, we will send all reports, all papers to them. We'll get their opinion. And the doctor, which was Dr. Ashok Ved, who is also a trustee of KPIT, and that's how I got to know him in the first place. He was at Artemis at that point in time. So he would welcome the input from all of the doctors as well. And we would then decide the next course of treatment based on the collective input of these doctors.
So what would you want to say to our viewers? Do you think that multiple opinions, multiple decisions is necessary? Do they leave it to their doctor? Do they do their research? Do they get a panel of doctors to help them if they have a cancer patient? What, in your opinion, was really what worked in this?
I would say that I think taking at least one more opinion for every major decision is not a bad idea. It is a pretty critical call. And if you look at what the patient goes through in chemotherapy, it is a pretty gruesome medicine, as gruesome as it gets. I mean, the whole purpose of this medicine is to kill human cells. So before you take and it has lots of side effects, I think it's, if nothing else, for your own mental peace and more importantly for the patient's mental comfort, I think it's good to take a second opinion. If you see a major divergence, maybe consult a third. If it's consistent between the two doctors, then just go for what the doctor is recommending. In my mother's case, if I call every chemotherapy session as a chemotherapy, she went through about 60 chemotherapies during her 4.5 years. Right. There was no drug that we did not try, including experimental drugs in the end. So we had to take a lot of decisions, and she went through 3 surgeries at different points in times. So lots of decisions were being made during this process. And at least I think in hindsight, it was helpful that we had multiple doctors to consult.
So you do think a second or a third opinion one must have in hand when they're making decisions. Okay. So you were saying it's this gruesome thing and, you know, it's this terrible medicine and the patient goes through a lot. So if you're a caregiver and the patient is going through all this turmoil and all these changes and reactions to medicines, how does it affect you? I mean, you're still working, right? You have a life, you have a family, you have all of that, and you have a patient at home that is going through all this. So how does that work? How does it affect your life, your daily routine?
To be honest, I think during that period, one probably doesn't listen too much to one's own needs or emotions during that period, because you are busy taking care of a patient at that point in time. That said, I think it's a wrong idea actually in many ways, because, and it comes back to bite you sort of more quickly than
Yes.
I would like to believe that my wife and I have had a great marriage so far, but the only time we have seen massive turbulences is during that period. I think the system just gets pushed to the edge.
Right.
I think for a large part of her treatment, I spent all my Saturdays in the hospital, every Saturday. And even outside of that, sometimes there's an injection to be given, sometimes there's a blood test to be taken, even those other trips that you make. So what begins to happen very quickly is that you are apologizing all the time at work, first of all. Oh, sorry, I can't travel to Bombay tomorrow. Why? Because my mother needs to go and get a blood test done. So always sort of waffling. Second, you're also not able to give time to anybody else at home. Actually, forget giving time to them. You're also taking time for other people for the same patient at home as well. Sometimes I can't go, so Pooja will be taking my mother elsewhere. So almost the entire system in a way comes together to try and serve the patient. And if anybody were to call my mother, and she was like, I think probably as positive a human being as it gets, and everybody would always ask her ki, Mitlesh, tumhari tabiyat kaisi? Right? I mean, how you are doing? And she will always say, mujhe kya hua? Bahut achhi hai. Perfect. But I always think that there is a face that people keep for the outside.
Yeah.
And you need to do that not to expose your vulnerabilities. But there is a different state that you go through in these situations. And if I look back, I think I ignored the needs at least of both Pooja and children during at least the first couple of years. I always say this, at least to Pooja, but at the time my mother's cancer happened, my younger one was 2 months. Yes. I think every time in the house we talk about, so her name is Arushi. Every time we talk about, remember when Arushi walked first, remember when she said this, remember her first day in the daycare, remember this, remember that. I actually have zero memories of her first day in the house. Absolutely zero memories, actually. I just can't remember actually what happened during that time.
Right.
And I don't know if she has paid that price or not, but that's certainly a price I think I have paid.
You have paid.
In hindsight. So yes, to come back, I think there is clearly a price we pay, but as I said earlier, I think it's important to recognize your needs, and maybe I'll quote, not really quote, but talk about someone. If some of you have not read this book, I would ask you to read 2 books. So there is this professor at Carnegie Mellon who became very famous. He was a computer science professor in his 40s, got diagnosed with a pancreatic cancer. His name was Randy Pausch. And he published this book called The Last Lecture. He became very famous because he had pancreatic cancer, did not survive too long. but the things he did, the positivity he showed, the videos he made, the lessons he made, the things he did for his children, the way he organized the finances for his family, for the future, all those things couldn't be more perfect. I mean, it's just totally out of a fairy tale. And you feel inspired when you read the book. Anyway, he died. 3 years later, his wife, Jay Posh, published a book, and the name was Dreaming New Dreams. And maybe because I associate more with Jay Posh than to Randy Posh because I didn't have cancer. But it's worth reading because you get probably a different narrative of exactly the same period from a slightly different angle. And I think it's just important to recognize what you're going through. I was in many ways super fortunate that I had a sibling, and I mean, he's a strategy consultant, probably works 18 hours a day. But during those 4.5 years, I think there were umpteen number of times when he was traveling to India every month. If I were to call him, let's say on Thursday, I say, Deepak, you need to be in India on Saturday. He will take the flight that night, he'll be there.
My goodness.
Didn't matter what his situation was, what it was, he will be back in India at that point in time. So there is actually a lot more help available sometimes than we give it credit for. His wife, being a doctor, was frankly, one, the voice of sanity, two, a recourse whenever we just had no clue what to do. Clearly, of course, Pooja was there full time. But I think what I mentioned earlier, that we forget how much goodness is available around her. I think at least the beauty of India sometimes is that the entire extended family just pitches in for what you need at that point in time. And while I think there was an initial period of me trying to be heroic, thereafter I realized that, look, not only do we need to make sure that my mother lives as long as she can, but she needs to have a good time. She will have a good quality of life only if I'm also having a reasonable quality of life alongside.
Right.
If she sees me being miserable, there is just no way on earth that she's going to be happy at that point in time. And therefore, I need to do a few things that makes her feel that I'm also doing okay through this period. So we almost made it a rule that one family member from the extended family will be with her at every point in time, in addition. Whether it's her younger sister, whether it's her brothers, actually it's a whole, I can't even name the number of people who came and stayed with us during that period. The number of people who allowed Pooja and I and children to take vacations while we were going through this. Because just for our sanity, sometimes we had to escape.
We need to get out.
We need to get out. And it wasn't easy at some points, but we would essentially get that relief crew, if I may call it that. And pretty much family members are available. And lastly, because my mother was still not that old, she went through reasonable periods of remission. And she would travel to New York to be with my brother for periods as well. So she traveled back and forth. So I would say that she had a good quality of life, but we also were not too bad during that entire period.
So obviously it seems like you had a lot of support, but everybody we've had who's come in to talk about CAM and things, they all talk about self-care for the caregiver. It's like you were saying, you don't focus too much on yourself, but that in the bigger picture is actually detrimental because it's not helping anybody. It's not helping you, not giving you enough energy. So everybody talks about how you need to have, you need to take care of yourself for the patient to do better. So you're saying that having people around and reaching out for help and having them help actually helped you. A lot of people say the more people there are, the more opinions you get, the more interference there is, and the patient doesn't like it. But obviously it worked for you to have a huge family and have everybody around, right?
Absolutely. I think for me, There were two critical things that worked, actually three. One, having a spouse who was an equal partner in this journey. Number two, having my brother
Yeah.
with whom I could be totally vulnerable. There were lots of times I was very angry with my mom too. And that anger I could not express to anybody else but to him. And he will talk to me and then he will talk to my mom in those periods. So I think having one person at least with whom you can be just brutally honest in sharing your feelings and be vulnerable, I think that was important. And third, I think it's just important not to be macho and
Reach
just
out and ask.
ask for help. I think is
Yeah,
important.
you need it.
Yeah.
That's something that I think all caregivers should give. They feel that take on the responsibility a little too seriously.
Yeah.
So you were telling us in the beginning that the minute you heard she had cancer, you had all those visions of what cancer is supposed to be like. So what was cancer really like? What were you expecting and what did you actually get? I mean, was there any...
Actually, interesting question, Madhu, because I think we all have created a monster out of cancer.
Exactly.
And look, maybe I don't know whether it's a good statement to make or not, but we all will die for some reason.
At some point of time.
It could be a cancer, it could be Alzheimer's, it could be just an accident on the road. I have no idea.
Exactly.
But it could be a variety of different reasons. Cancer is just one cause as well. And the good news is that medical science has come so far today that it has done two things. Number one, it can meaningfully increase the span of life compared to what we thought was possible, and actually, in many, many cases, completely cure also. So we need to shed those impressions of the past. Number two, cancer is no longer a disease where you're lying in pain in your solitary bed, vomiting all the time. Yes, I mean, yes, maybe there might be those brief moments, but there is so much palliative care today that makes the journey relatively bearable. And I think, in general, I feel that the notion of pain or happiness usually comes from your definition of what's a normal. And the moment cancer happens, the first time the normal shifts, yes, it's painful. First chemotherapy was the most painful. But very quickly you realize in a few months, there is a new normal. And your happiness and your sadness gets defined by the new normal, not by the old normal any longer.
That's true.
And that new normal then just lasts. So just because you have one vomiting in 1 week or feeling nauseous, actually, maybe, that's okay. That becomes part of life, right? So you begin to tolerate those things and that just becomes normal. In this period, my mom see my younger daughter grow up actually a lot more than I did, clearly. She saw the birth of another grandchild in New York.
Oh, how lovely.
And she spent so much time with so many people. And as I said, it was actually a pretty reasonable quality of life, despite the fact that she was almost stage 4. So, and again, no matter what I do, I can't thank Dr. Ashok Vaid enough as well. Maybe I'll say this, that one thing is the technical competence of a doctor, but I think far more important is the ability of the doctor to make a patient feel comfortable. There is no way my mother would have gone through 60 chemotherapies had it not been for Dr. Vaid. There were so many times when she would privately confess to us, saying that, "Beta, bahut ho gaya. Main bahut ji liya. I think just let me die. I think it's okay." And then I will tell her, "Look, ultimately you make the decision, not us. But why don't we go and ask Dr. Vaid?" And we will go and meet Dr. Vaid. She'll come back pumped up. Of course, I'll go to now the next line of chemotherapy. So that's why I'm saying that as you look back at these periods, you realize how much goodness exists around you.
That's a beautiful thought to have at the end of the whole journey. So choosing your doctor is really important, right? They need to choose. Everybody needs to make sure that you're comfortable with the doctor and it's not scary. You had a good doctor, you had support, you had all of that, but there still must have been a lot of challenges, right? What was your biggest challenge in the whole journey?
maybe two things come to my mind, and maybe some of these will be common for most situations. Some of them may not be. One is that because this medicine is so gruesome and so is a disease in some ways. And sorry, I'm using that word just after saying that it is not that gruesome. And we make a monster out of it. But my mother at some point began to see symptoms of anxiety. And, different people behave differently during anxiety. My mother was, I'm trying to look for the right character to compare, but she was like almost Rani Lakshmibai kind of a character.
Oh, okay.
And so there are some people who, when they have anxiety, they quieten down, they go into a shell. And my mom will be like riding on her horse with her sort of sword out of it.
Must have been exciting times, Alok.
Yeah, in hindsight, exciting. I didn't think they were exciting. But which means that we couldn't have any maid that would stay beyond a month. So it was chaos. And I remember that I once went to Dr. Vaid alone. And I told him that, look, I can't deal with this any longer. And he said, look, don't worry, why don't you get your mother to see me? And in his own nice way, he explained to my mom that, look, and my mother, by the way, was a bio major herself.
Okay.
And she was a bio and chemistry major both. So he explained the chemical changes that happen because of these drugs, why that leads to changes in the brain. And therefore, it's just a very natural outcome. And he said, you should just go visit a doctor and take medication. But that period was super challenging. Because my mother was very headstrong, she literally fired the doctor the first time she saw him. The only doctor she respected was Dr. Vaid. Other than that, it was hard for a doctor to survive for a few minutes in front of my mom.
Oh, wow. Must have been tough, Alok.
But luckily, she took medication. But our toughest moments were that because my mom was very headstrong, she would just leave the medication. And literally in 3-4 days after her leaving the medication, you could see the symptoms coming back and our house will be on fire, truly on fire. And that's when I think at least Pooja and I had some toughest moments, or I had tough moments with my mom. That entire period of her going through anxiety was, I think, very, very hard. That's one. The second, which I sort of regret in hindsight too, is that my mother always was very independent. She wanted to stay alone. Even when we came back to India, she said, why don't you guys stay separately? I'll stay separately. And I think I can manage. I know that you guys are there and that's a support to me, but that doesn't mean we need to be in the same house. And we dismissed the idea completely. We said, that's not even a possibility. And ironically, so she died in 2011. In 2010, on July 4th, which is the American Independence Day, if you will, I came home from office and she was sitting with all her stuff packed. And I came home and she said that, look, it's your call. Either you can drop me to my apartment or I'll take an auto. As simple as that. And she was pretty late stage by that time. I mean, it was 3.5 years into the treatment. So I first weighed in my mind, should I argue or not argue? But I had learned enough that point was not an argument time. Anyway, I moved her to her apartment that day. And I remember several nights I couldn't sleep. Why? Because not for any other reason. I think that's when I felt that I have completely failed her as a son. That someone who I knew was close to dying basically told me that, look, you can't take care of me, or you have not taken good care of me, which is why I'm leaving, and I will just stay separately. And I think that was probably my dip in that entire period. In hindsight, I'll also say, Mridu, that we optimize for the amount of time someone lives. I think we failed to optimize for the quality of life. I think that independence plays a pretty large role. Am I still there? I don't know if my screen is frozen, so I don't know whether that's because of me or. Okay. So, as I said, I dropped my mom, and she still survived about 10 months from that point in time, 10, 11 months. And if I have to pick a period in that 4.5 years where my mom was the happiest, I think it was those months. Maybe I'll answer one of the questions that that is there on the chat right now. During your mother's treatment, what was the most difficult part to handle? Emotional support, financial, hospitals, or anything else, or all of them? So I think let's take the easy part of this, and I think consider ourselves incredibly fortunate that even though my mother had full insurance, but the red tapeism, my father used to be in a government job, all those reimbursements were very hard. But with whatever little my father had left, my mother insisted that she will pay for every dime of her treatment. And even though money was not a constraint, even remotely, and again, I mean, thank God it wasn't. We didn't have to make any suboptimal calls. But my mother afforded her own treatment until the time she died. And I know that she was very proud of the fact that she was not dependent on us for money. So I think that part was not the hard part at all. Actually, I know I've talked about many different hard parts, but in hindsight, I think maybe it's a journey that wasn't too bad. Mridu has joined as well.
Yes. So you want to complete that answer, or were you?
So no, I was saying that on the challenges front, Mridu, that you talked about, I think that I was saying that we forget how important independence is. My mother moved. So I was saying that in the 4.5 years that she survived, her best 10 months was the time when she lived alone.
Oh.
I used to live in a constant state of fear, because how do I know that she goes to a bathroom and she slips?
Yeah.
She faints. I will have no clue. I would, of course, keep my phone to my chest during that time. But I think that I used to go there every single day. But I think that's the time she felt herself. She liked to work always. And she used to sell cosmetics for this brand called Oriflame. Oh, before she had cancer, she had become, because she was a very social person, she had a network of 400 resellers that used to work under her.
Oh, wow.
So she had become a director in that company, but she continued that all along. And then she would insist that we should go to her house for dinner too, or lunch. She will cook. And she was so happy during that period. And I think in hindsight, while I'm calling this the biggest challenge, I think my biggest regret consequently is that I think I should have allowed her to make some decisions for herself and not try to be this guy that will be the responsible person, will be the good son, and therefore will make all the calls, etc., etc. I feel that I should have given her the independence to make her calls too.
That is, I mean, just that the sense of independence and freedom, that even if you are if suffering from a disease, if you own your life, it gives you a different kind of power. But that was going to be one of my questions, actually. What is your largest regret? You have already told me, but I wanted to go back to the first challenge you were telling me about her having anxiety and having to deal with it. That's part of the disease, right? It's a side effect of the medicines you're taking. Isn't it part of the treatment also? Does the family have to make a decision on actually going out there and taking treatment for a side effect that has happened with the disease? Maybe other people don't have a doctor who will sit down and explain it to them. How do they know that they need to take a call?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Mridu. It's important as a caregiver to watch out for signs of rapid mood swings. And as I said, it can manifest itself in very different ways in different people. if you see people crying for no reason, if you find them to be becoming belligerent in certain cases or over aggressive, there can be many different signs. And it's just a very natural consequence of the medications one is taking and the knowledge sometimes also, and the impact it has on your psyche that look, you are going to die. And you see a very slow death process sometimes here. So what happened was very natural. I think we were fortunate to discover, and I'm sure that as palliative care has actually improved over the years, I'm sure that doctors today are far more proactive about it. But it's important, I think, for caregivers to also recognize that and improve both the patient's quality of life and their own quality of life in the process as well.
Exactly. Also, you say that you had that biggest dip when you felt that you weren't being a good son. Wouldn't you blame this whole thing on the disease rather than on yourself? I mean, it's just a course of the disease doing this and wanting to be able to do more than you can and not being able to see that something else could have probably had a better result. You can give yourself benefit of the doubt, right?
See, Mridu, whether I like it or not, I will have to confess the guilt on one count, which is that if I was taking so good care of her, then I think she had no reason to leave. Or if her independence was so important to her that the last period of her life was the best that she had, I was guilty of not giving that to her more and allowing her to have it before as well. So I don't know which of the sins was bigger in hindsight, but clearly to exonerate myself from both of those, I think it's going to be a hard one.
So do you say that the caregivers have got to leave some space for the patient to make decisions? We just assume that you cannot make a decision on your own. We just assume that you are unwell and I need to take care of you. Those are the dynamics, right? That is how it works.
So, that's right. That's right. And I think maybe this is something to do with Indian men also, that we tend to pride ourselves a little bit too much in our ability to decide everything. I do think that, and maybe it depends on the patient also. My mother was a fiercely independent woman.
That is also what makes it.
And so I know that it's not about sometimes right decision or wrong decision. It's just the knowledge that you are taking your own decisions. And that's the one thing I did not give to her during this period.
I just want to say, if you were a stereotypical Indian male, you wouldn't be admitting it. You wouldn't even have realized it. The fact that you are saying that it is a mindset that. So,
Ritu, can I add one more challenge? And maybe this is for the
please do.
Many people. I think the hardest decision I took was right towards the end of life. Which is, and I think unfortunately, some of you may be faced with this as well. I think palliative care today has come to a point where you can extend the life for a long time and sometimes in a pretty painful state. At one point, we realized that there is no medicine my mom can take. Her platelet count was too low. Blood could not recover, and therefore we could not take any medication. So she started going down. And again, symptoms in different cancers will be different, but cancer began to invade her lungs, and therefore she began to have shortness of breath, which is very common. You begin to have fluid accumulating in your lungs. And this was sometime in April of 2011, where we were giving her medication for those fluids to be evacuated. At one point, medication also was not working. And Dr. Vaid was kind enough that he assigned one of the doctors to visit us home every few days to make sure that my mother could get the right palliative care. And at one point, that doctor said that, you know what, I don't think medication is going to work. We need to basically put a syringe in and take fluids out. And every time we do that, she'll be able to be comfortable for the next 2 to 3 weeks. But we'll have to repeat it every 2 weeks. And he said that, look, but Alok, if I were you, I would not do it. And I dismissed the idea ki why would we not do it? And then I said, okay, let me call Dr. Vaid. And I called him and he said that, Alok, you are fooling yourself if you think you're changing the answer. You know that there is no answer to be changed. Your mother is in pain right now. Earlier she was not, but now she's in intense pain. So my mother was on morphine all the time.
Correct. Mine too.
And he said that, look, does it matter to you whether the date is X or X plus 10 days or X plus 20 days? Remember that you are at that point only extending her pain.
The pain.
I just couldn't accept the answer. So that night I called my brother. I remember that we talked for hours that day on the phone. And there was a part of us that was trying to be the rational, logical part that said, I think we should let my mother be at this point and let her go. And the other part that was saying, equally logically, saying that you are making a very conscious call of, and you can use whatever language you want to use, letting her die early or killing her early, whatever, right? Because we know the cause, we know the effect now at this point in time. And we know that the syringe can be put in and taken out several times. So maybe she could have lived for 2 more months actually with that process, who knows? We eventually decided that we will do what Dr. Vaid said, which is that we will not take the fluid out. And I think at least that day I felt that I took the active call of letting my mother die. She lasted only a few more days post that. But yeah, that was a challenging call. And I think now that I have met so many cancer patients since then, one advice I'll give to most people again is, and I have repeated that theme several times, focus on quality of life, not the amount of time. And just, this is not a milestone that you have to reach. And therefore, make sure that you give the right quality of life to the patient for as long as you can. But when you can't give it, actually sometimes it's better for that eventual relief to come when it does come. And we should not be heroic. And making those calls of when not to give medication and when not to give life support, I think is an equally important call as a caregiver.
These are very big decisions. But if you look back, you're okay with the call you took, right?
Yes, that call actually I feel in
You were
hindsight,
okay with it.
I took the right call.
It was the right one.
Yeah.
And when all was said and done and you look back at the whole journey, you can say today that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And how did you cope with all? You knew she was going to go. You'd known that for the last 4.5 years. But even so, when somebody actually goes, it still has its entire emotional place of being. So how do you deal with that? You know, you suddenly have so much time freed up. You have this void in your life. How does that, how do caregivers then go from there to getting on with living?
Yeah, actually, interesting question. I never cared too much for traditions, neither did my mom. So first of all, she said, once I die, please make sure there is no pandit. We don't go put my ashes anywhere. There is no tervi, whatever. She said, just cut the crap totally. And if at all you want to do something, celebrate my life post that. Please don't try and sort of talk me negatively at that point in time. So we did exactly that. We took her to an electric crematorium. We put her ashes below a tree right in front of our house. We had a prayer meeting where the only thing one could talk about was happy memories. Nothing else was allowed.
Oh, how nice.
And thereafter, I knew that the vacuum it might create immediately. And I did something which in hindsight was, I think, a good call, though I'm sure that many traditional relatives of mine would have balked upon, which is I wrapped up my mother's apartment. I emptied it out. My brother was still there. In 1 week, we basically did everything. The same day that my brother was going back to US, I said, I'm also going to US today. and we will go for an Alaska cruise.
Oh.
So that I will not have to take any phone call. I don't want to talk to people to commiserate with me at that point in time.
Correct.
And I just don't want to talk to anyone actually at that point in time. So we spent the next 10 days essentially being out of pocket, unavailable to the world, only to be available to ourselves.
Perfect. Perfect.
And, I think if my mom was there, there was no other way she would have wanted it as well.
You deserve that time to with yourself, I'm sure, by then. That was wonderful. And from all of this, I mean, I know it personally, but for our viewers, all of this led to CAPID eventually. You decided to do something for cancer then, right?
Well, it is, I mean, at least for me, and I know Mridu, for you and for Dr. Bell and different people, it's different who all came together. For me, indeed, I felt that whatever money was left behind in the end from my mother, and I think maybe you were not there at that point, I said she paid for every dime of her treatment. She didn't want to take a dime from me in that process.
That's one of the biggest challenges for cancer patients, you know, the financial burden of it.
Yeah. But I basically thought that, look, I want to put it to good use and not for a few more vacations for me or whatever, buying some stocks or whatever else. So, and I thought cancer was a natural cause given what we went through. And indeed was, I would say, in some ways, the genesis of something to do with cancer in my mind, at least, yes.
It's a good thing you said that, because one of our first questions here is that cancer is hereditary in most cases. Do you feel worried about your other family members?
I think, see, this notion of heredity of cancer, there is some truth to it as well. I don't think I can argue against it. But I think there are just tons of other causes that lead to cancer today. So does it worry me? No. First of all, not at all. That's not my worry. I also think that it has helped us to get a health checkup every year, which we never bothered about in the past. So, but I don't feel paranoid about it or whatever.
Okay.
I think, as I said, that I don't care, to be honest, how long I live or whether it's cancer or something else. So I'm actually okay with that.
So it hasn't kind of scarred you and left some long
Not at all.
kind of a fear in your heart.
Not at all.
So there is another question. How do you want to wrap up this phase? And whom do you want to thank for all the strength and support during those tough times?
How do I want to wrap up? I think I want to remember all the good times from that time, frankly. Like I said, the decision to be with her, I don't think I made with an active mind. That decision just got taken in a way. But the time we spent, I regret to date that I couldn't say so many things to my dad that I wanted to say. With my mom, I have no such regret. We spent every Saturday together in the hospital. We had all the time to ourselves. We will gossip, we'll talk about, we'll analyze people, we'll bitch about situations, we'll talk about our lives. She will tell me how I was in childhood. I learned so much about me during that process too. She will tell me the similarity between my elder one and me. So there were so many things we talked about during that period.
Would never have spoken about otherwise.
Yeah, those things would have been just completely unsaid had it not been for that time, right?
So lovely. And that's what you hold on to. Those are the thoughts that, those are the memories you hold on to.
Yeah. Mridu, can I share my screen
Please do.
Share my screen for 30 seconds?
Please do. Please do.
So I think I'll need to be allowed. Once I'm allowed, you let me know.
Yes, yes, you're allowed now.
Okay. If I'm allowed, I'm just going to share my screen.
Absolutely.
Because I'm talking so much about one individual. So I don't know if my screen can be seen.
Yes, it can be seen.
So that is...
That's your mom.
That
How
is my
lovely.
time of her marriage. And sorry, I'm going to share one more picture.
Please do. This is so lovely.
This is a picture in the latter part of her life, not too far from when she passed away.
Really? But you're looking so young in this, Alok.
Well, I was younger than what I am first time. But that's my brother and I with my mom. In one
Is
of
this after cancer?
yeah,
Because
this
she's
after
looking
cancer.
really healthy. She's looking healthy, good.
She survived pretty well. As I said,
Yes, yes.
she survived pretty well. So sorry, I'm going to come back.
Lovely, lovely. That is so beautiful. So nice to see. So whom would you like to thank for the strength and the support through those years?
Actually, just tons of people. It's hard to even name the number of people, Mridhu. I just think that when you need help and you ask for help, and actually sometimes even without asking, it's just amazing how many people come through. I'll just give an example. There is this doctor in California whose husband I sort of vaguely knew. And we reached out to him to take advice from his wife. And I barely knew the guy and just didn't know his wife at all, practically. I think I must have had 100 calls with her during these 4.5 years.
Oh.
He has become one of my closest friends in that process. Dr. Vad became such a good friend just because of this cancer process. There was a neighbor of ours who we didn't even know. And I mean, the guy was my age, his dad had cancer. So uncle and my mom were on a bed next to each other in the hospital one day for chemo. And they figured that we are neighbors. And they became very close friends until that uncle died first. And he had colon cancer. You discover new friendships, you discover new people, you discover, as I said, goodness in so many people that you didn't know existed in that process. So I just think that these are things you cherish. I'll say one more thing here, which is that my grandmother had a prolonged sickness period too, my paternal grandmother. And she spent an inordinate amount of time with my dad and one of my uncles, largely. And sometimes I remember that my mom would say, ki, she's always with us, kind of a thing. In a not too happy a tone, if I may say so. And privately, my dad would say to me all the time, he said that, we always teach people that they should take care of elders. But he said, all those things are very empty, frankly. We talk of these values.
Correct.
The only way you pass on values is when you exhibit them. And he said, if I am not taking care of my mother at the time she needs me most, there will be no way that you will be taking care of me or your mom when they need it.
Correct.
Probably. And, when you talk about the fact that how did one take the decision to be the caregiver, as I said, these are unconscious calls you take. But I think you do borrow a lot from what you have learned from your parents. And I hope in some ways we might have passed it on to our children as well.
Exactly. It's maybe unconscious, but somewhere it's subconscious. Somewhere you've seen and you've experienced it and you just kind of play it out. Yeah. But that's a nice thing to say out there, because we talk a lot about values. Yes, everybody talks about them. And then we hear about how elderly people have been left and, there's nobody to care for cancer patients now that we work in the field with them.
Right.
So you've said a lot of things for caregivers. We have a question. What are some suggestions you want to give to the caregivers? Do you have some key points that you would say would be?
Yeah. I think, number one, be compassionate to yourself.
The biggest one.
I think cancer is a long journey. Be good to yourself. That's the only way you can be good to the patient. And that's the only way that I think you will have any semblance of normalcy around you. Recognize your needs. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable yourself. And be ready to admit those vulnerabilities to other people as well. So I think that's probably message number one. Message number two is that optimize the system and not just the patient again. Remember that you might have your spouse, you might have your children, you might have yet another parent who might, whatever, or so there are, try to optimize the whole system and don't optimize everything from just one person's perspective. Number three, ask for help. Ask for help shamelessly, actually. And
take help. If somebody is offering help, take help. Like you said, they don't need to be macho all the time.
Right. And fourth, maybe at least reading some stuff helped, as I said. I liked reading Jay Posh quite a bit. My mom read both Jay Posh and Randy Posh, both actually. We read many other books together too. But I think this entire thing is that I think the beauty of this disease, if I may say so, is that you genuinely get to spend a lot of time together. Time has to end for everyone. But once you know that actually it is going to end, you do tend to behave like sometimes they say in English that treat every day as if it's your last day. I don't know if we did that for every day. I think we probably did that for every month. I remember, for example, at one point, we were just literally 2 years into the treatment. One day, Dr. Bad told me privately that I think your mother has 3 months. And I went to my boss and I said, I'm going to spend only 50% time at my job. No travel. I won't take a flight because I want to be with her. We organized a music mehfil. We created a book for her. I am actually going to.
Oh.
Where
Impression. Mithlesh is her name, was it?
So the entire family wrote about her. Now the question is, had she died of a heart attack with no notice,
wouldn't have gotten the time.
This wouldn't have happened. I remember how proud she was when she read this thing. She read it aloud with everyone in the room. And I think she was in 7th heaven when she read it. She always wanted to go to Vaishno Devi. And I'm actually not much of a believer in God, I'll confess. But I'm a believer in her. So I went to Vaishno Devi with her. And I really enjoyed that trip.
Oh.
So there are so many memories from that time, which actually would have never gotten created had this not happened. So do enjoy the journey as well, as strange as it may sound. But I think those are moments that we all do remember later.
What a lovely message that is. Yeah, because I mean, who would think of enjoying the journey? But yeah, you've got to build memories from it. And you can build wonderful memories if you were to focus on that. So there is a question about, has your goal as founder of Capid satisfied your need to do something for cancer, or you have something yet to achieve?
I think you will never achieve what you want to achieve is probably the thing here. All I can say is that, at least for me, through Capid, I'm not trying to look for any grandness here. I think even if there is one life saved, that's probably meaningful. There are not that many people who are as fortunate as we were to have the medical care we did. It's easy for me to say that we could take opinion from a doctor in New York and one in Cleveland, one in California, whatever, 60 chemotherapies. But I know how hard it is for so many other people. And therefore, I think whatever little we are doing, on one hand is satisfying, on the other hand is always too little. I think there's a lot more to be done. I also think that our journey was actually very easy personally. Whenever I used to go to hospital, and there was one instance in a month or 2 months where on the adjacent bed there used to be a 2-year-old boy, where the family used to come from 3 hours away and for his chemotherapy. And both my mom and I used to talk about the fact that, look, how lucky we are. Look at what's happening to that family. And imagine if this were to be happening to us, where would we be at this point in time? And she used to say, I have at least lived my life. So I think through Capid, maybe there is a chance to help some people who are yet to fully live their lives too. And hopefully we do that. who knows? But yes, by no means have we achieved what we want to achieve.
There's still a long way to go, right? One more question, as far as I can see. At what point did you accept the inevitability to the end of the journey? How did you cope with it?
I think this is the downside of reading too much. Inevitability dawned on me the day the diagnosis happened. Because you read all kinds of probability of, what's the probability of a 5-year life and 3-year, whatever. The number of research papers I read on cancer is not funny during that period too. So that I think at no point was I thinking that the outcome will be any different.
Oh.
And maybe that's not such a good thing. Maybe I wish I was not reading so many things. Maybe I was a bit in the dark where I was in the hope. I think hope plays such a big role. And I think that that inevitability I knew. But how did I cope with it? I don't know, actually. I'm trying to think back. How did I cope with that inevitability? I think the first half of my mom's cancer, the whole idea was to extend the time period. And in the latter half, I would say, we just wanted to do whatever my mom wanted to do. And I think that was the best way to cope.
Keep going, basically.
Yeah.
Just keep going. And I know it must have been really hard, Alok, to share this personal side of your life and this journey and all of it. And we can all see what it must have been and how difficult it was, and the emotional roller coaster that caregivers go through. We've spoken to others as well. It is really difficult. And the whole journey, I mean, the patient, of course, is strong and is going on and is going through the pain and all of it. And the caregiver, because has no obvious wounds and pain, it's so difficult to see what they are going through during this journey. So your courage and your journey is something that we are going to now have to display, because it is very inspirational. Thank you so much for taking this time and sharing it with us. We are very, very grateful that you were able to share. I'm sure there are a lot of caregivers out there who have things that they can pick up from this. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you, Mridu. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank the entire KPIT team, all the volunteers, and so many people who have helped, I think, through the last 6 years in this journey. And if anybody remotely today is on the call who was such a critical part of my mom's journey as well, I truly, truly do want to thank for what they did at that point in time.
How lovely. Thank you, Alok.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us.